And so it was then after that of seeing the results and having that be so contrary to what we're told to expect that I really had to start unpacking everything that I had been sort of pre-filled in my mind about what work meant. And so, because you'll hear people say that, like, oh, work smarter, not harder. Or, oh, the results are in the 20%, not the 80%, and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I think as long as part of you feels deep down that A, you can work 50 hours a week, and that B, it says something good about you in terms of values that you're able to and that you do it, then you're going to keep doing it, right? Like, even if you're not getting the results you want.
Join me, 'cause I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, oh, oh, oh. I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine, I'm seeking sunshine. Welcome to Seeking Sunshine, Do What Lights You Up, a podcast for passionate, creative moms who are ready to live their best life and be their full, lit-up selves while being amazing moms, because it's possible to be both. It turns out that you don't have to lose yourself in motherhood, and I'm here to show you how. This is Seeking Sunshine 2.0 because we are no longer focusing on the problems, but on the solutions. It's your turn to shine. Welcome back to the Seeking Sunshine podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad I'm here. What an amazing, restful break I got to have. If you got to hear my announcement last week, I took a break. I haven't taken a break in, a year and a half. The last one was not intentional, so it was really nice to take that time off, and I'm so excited to be back. Today's interview is, oh my word. I just finished listening to it, and this is an amazing interview. I'm really excited to share it with you. My guest today is Skye Warren, and we're going to talk about the incredible possibilities that are available to you no matter what your limitations are. Like if you're a mom and you are stuck at home, or if you are sick and have illnesses, there's so much available to you. How you can make money without the extra stress and extra work, and how self-care is a mechanism for living to our full potential. Oh man, so good. So Skye Warren is the New York Times best-selling author of Dangerous Romance. Her books have sold over 2 million copies, and she makes her home in Texas with her loving family, sweet dogs, and a sugar glider. She is so inspirational, and I'm really, really excited to dive into this episode. But before I do, I wanted to remind you that my podcast creation course is officially out. And if you've ever thought about having your own podcast, this is a really amazing opportunity for you to learn how to do everything that I'm doing, but make it fit to your life. That's what my whole course is all about, is making podcasting work for you. Your voice deserves to be heard, and you should be recording your stories and your legacy, and of the same thing for all the people around you that you know and love. Record their stories, have that saved for generations to come, and start making a difference with your knowledge and your wisdom and your experiences, because you were made to make a difference in this world. But I know that you're busy, and I know that all of the tech and everything sounds really intimidating, but in this course, I show you how easy it is and how it gets to work for you. So the link for that is in the show notes. And that was all I was going to say about that. And now on to this amazing episode with Skye. Welcome, Skye. Well, hi, Skye. I'm so excited to have you today on the Seeking Sunshine podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear your story and to get to know you better. So, I'd love to just dive right in. I know that you have such an amazing story that you're an author, right?
I am. Yeah, I write books for a living. They pay me to make up stories.
Well, that's the best,
I
right?
know, it's kind of the best. It's funny. It's quite a funny job, I think. But, I used to do before I became an author full time, I used to be in computer science. So I kind of think of it like in a way they're opposites, like left brain, right brain, but also in a way, like I just type things and then people are like, cool, that's what we wanted. So
That's amazing. So, how did you get into that?
so I discovered romance books so I always loved reading and I never dreamed of being a writer, which is actually really rare. A lot of people do have that hope. And I always was like kind of a science girl. And so I thought I would become a scientist of some kind. And I went into computer science and then I had my son. And he is 16 now. I was just telling you. And so 16 years ago, I was there nursing him, right? There's a lot of sitting.
Yeah.
And my husband got me like the early iPhone and I got the Kindle app and discovered the romance genre because I hadn't discovered it before.
Mm.
As soon as I started reading in it, I was just consuming everything I could find and loving it. And I knew that's kind of where I wanted to be. And I really, at the time, I didn't know whether a career would be possible. Like it wasn't clear. A lot of authors, there's kind of like the starving artist romanticism around that.
Yes.
So maybe the idea that in a way it's romantic, but also it's all you can get. You know what I mean? Like there's sort of no path towards like comfort or prosperity in this career. And so I wasn't sure, but I knew I wanted to write some books. So I started writing some books and some of them worked really well and some of them didn't. And I said, well, I don't want to go back to the office while my son is home and not see him ever. So like I took the jump and then both my husband and I kept thinking, well, when he starts kindergarten, maybe you'll go back and just built my business since then and never went back. So yeah, I've been doing this full time for many years now and have written around 50 books. It's kind of weird that to not know the exact number, but in fact, I don't. And it like kind of doesn't matter that much. But
That's amazing. And it's incredible. It's mind-blowing to be a mom who's pursuing her dreams because that's something that so many moms are struggling to even have the confidence to even dream. I mean, first of all, so many moms are like, "No, I just can't." How do you even begin to have a dream when that feels so far from what could ever possibly be? So do you like how do you start to get to that point as a mom, but as a human?
right. It's so true. And it's funny because when I started writing, I the reason why I started writing is because I was avidly reading, right? Just like consuming all of the books. And there were just certain books. I was part of forums at the time that was kind of the thing. And so we would give each other recommendations. People would ask, is there a book like this? And someone would tell them. And so I was participating in that community and I found it really beautiful, especially because romance in particular is populated by so many women and where I come from in computer science, it was very male dominated. And so I was really loving this community um and then I would look for certain books and I couldn't find them and I would get more and more specific with how I wanted them to be and then at some point realized, oh, that's just a story that's in my head. That's why I'm looking for it. And it doesn't exist because it's my story in my head and the only way to have it be on paper is to write it. And so, yes. And so I
That's
wrote
it.
and I wrote it like not necessarily thinking anyone would ever read it, not knowing what would happen to it or if anyone would ever like it. It was just kind of this idea that I wanted to get down on paper. And and yeah, I think it's nice actually to go into something like that with like sort of low expectations. I think if I had known, oh, it's gonna eventually you're gonna write 50 of these and eventually you're gonna make this much money and eventually you're gonna speak on a stage and or something like that or be at a signing it would have been way too much, right? Like it actually, like people recommend, oh, go one step at a time, but it's because the alternative is way too scary.
You
Uh,
can't handle it. You have to grow as you build. You have to be able to expand piece by piece
yes.
by piece by piece so that you can tolerate the expansion.
And it's also a lot of pressure when you're at a stage of a lot of uncertainty in your business because maybe because people come in and they might write because they might write a few books and then they might say, you know what, I don't like certain things about this industry or this job, and I don't actually want to spend all day writing and talking to readers and things like that. So I actually would rather have a different job. And it's okay, like there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, that's my one dream and it's immutable and I'm going to do it even if like it turns out to be not what I want it to be, right?
Yeah.
Or like, sometimes people will enter the industry and then they'll say, well, I got into it because I love books, but actually what I want to do is maybe not write them, but I want to be an agent or I want to do something else in the industry. And so yeah, so it's kind of like when you have the big dreams, like first of all they're really intimidating, but also you don't have all the information yet that you're going to
Yeah.
have as you go.
Oh, it's so true. There's so much I want to dive into here. At what point did you decide that this wasn't just a hobby, this wasn't just for fun, this was a business, that this was serious, this was a career path?
That's a really good question. In a way, my first thought in my head was that I haven't yet decided that, just because I don't like permanence. And I just kind of like to, even now that I am like relatively established, I've reached certain milestones in my career, like hit, bestseller lists and, and like supporting my family this way. There's still a part of me that's like, but if you didn't want to write another book, you wouldn't have to. Like you're not tied to this. But in terms of, I think maybe when I started to see like financially, and this is really where I love this career for women and mothers in particular, is so a few years into my career, I suddenly had this sort of like health crisis where I was previously a highly productive person and I never took naps and all of this kind of thing. And then suddenly I went to sleeping 18 hours a day. And I went to doctors, they said nothing's wrong with you. And and then they would send me to specialists who would say there's nothing wrong with you. And it was really quite a long journey
And
to
that's
even
so disheartening to hear that there's nothing like wrong, because that's obviously not true. If there
right,
was nothing
exactly.
wrong, like you wouldn't be having symptoms. Like symptoms are a symptom of something being wrong. So,
Right, exactly, exactly. It was just it was very eye-opening about the healthcare industry that, they kind of like, well, we have these tests that we run, and if nothing flags, then we send you away. And it was like, wow. And so before I could, sort of even have any relief, I'm just living in this space for like a solid year of just like no like sort of hope for changes. And by that time, we were relying on the amount of money that I was making, like we needed it for our family. And so I had this, and I was sleeping 18 hours, but even when I was awake, I was dizzy. I
yeah.
was feeling exhausted. Like it was just like um I wasn't really able to perform in any way. And so I had
Well,
this.
and people don't really understand like how much like having that fogginess in your
Yeah,
brain, how much it severely impacts your ability to function. It's truly kind of like detrimental to your entire life and your
it's
ability
huge,
to,
exactly. And our society, it's like I had always really idolized, like I was raised that way. I was like raised the daughter of an immigrant. And so I was raised to like believe in the American dream and you work hard and you achieve things and that's how you achieve things. And that's how you also like sort of get your worth as a human really is this hard work.
yeah.
And I hit the stage where it was like, you literally can't. And so for, I really couldn't even deal with my seeing my worth. I did have feelings about it, but I was sort of like on a practical level, how are we going to survive this? Because the other thing is, if you are staying home from if you're not working, there's this expectation of, well, at least you can save a little money by cleaning the house yourself or making the meals yourself. But like when you're going through this, you can't do any of that. You actually need more help.
If you're
And
not working, the least you could do is stay home and work.
I know exactly.
Well, and yeah, I don't think you know my story very well, but my husband's been disabled for a decade. And so I have this, and then I have three kids with special needs. And so I have this whole experience of caring for him and like through his whole journey of, you know, different levels of being able to function and whatnot. And I've seen all of this very much firsthand, how the doctors treat you and how different medications affect your body and how different conditions can just lay you flat out. And it's like, it's seriously a problem. And your self-worth is the very first thing that goes. Like, it really is. And that's the thing you need the most when you're there. Like, you can't build yourself back up to doing things when you don't think you're worth it.
Yeah, I think it's so hard because we're in a society that doesn't ever make room for that kind of situation,
Yeah.
right? There's no room for that. And so like I was able to have like a spouse who was concerned for me and would come with me to doctor's appointments and try to advocate for me the best he could. And your husband has you. So it's like it's great that we sometimes have, family and other people to help us, but I do wish there was more of a support system for people who either don't have that person or they have a spouse who's like not supportive and doesn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and the bottom line is that like our value is not in our productivity. It's
Yes.
just not. Our value is just inherent. We are just inherently worthy, period. End of story.
Yeah.
That's just it. And our society teaches that, that's not the case and that you have to keep hustle harder, work harder, and your value will increase. And that's not true. That's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely.
I could
And
I
so
could go on my soapbox there because that's what I
for
just
sure,
like.
I know for sure. And yeah, so during that time, I would kind of make this deal with myself where I would say, okay, you can sit upright for 2 hours. You can do that much. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy to sit
Yeah.
upright for 2 hours, but you can and you will. And And so I would do it. And then I would sit down at my desk and I would think to myself, okay, you have 2 hours. It might be one, honestly, if you can't make it, but it might be three on a good day. So what can you do to actually earn the amount of money that you need for your family? And I learned that at the time, and even now, actually, the most like common advice given to writers is like, just write more, just write another book, just write, keep writing, keep writing. And but I knew at like because I could just literally quite open up like my sales and say, well, if I sit down for 2 hours and write, then my sales are just falling because it's been a while since I released, nothing's really happening. So it's actually not writing for 2 hours that's going to increase my sales to what I need them to be. So it was during that time that I learned ads basically. And I was able to make what I needed. And then I was actually able to make more. And so that was actually the first time my business crossed six figures
Mm.
when I was working less than I ever had before. And it was such a contradictory experience that I was like, what was I doing all of that time when I had the ability to work 40 or even 50 or maybe even 60 hours a week? What was I doing that I was making less than I am now? And there's an author who I found only later, Kate Northrup, who talks about this experience in her book called Do Less. And her situation wasn't a health crisis she was having her child, but it was the same thing of like having this really narrow window of work and expecting that her sales would naturally go down, but trying to keep them at a certain level and discovering that actually her sales went up. She was making more than before. And it's just, again, it's something society tells us is A, not possible, or B, if it is possible, it's a scam. That's kind of the idea, right? Too good to be true because you're supposed to work hard and that's how you get rewards. And hard, we're specifically defining as long hours, but in seat.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
Efforting, hustling, stressing. More
right.
stress equals more money, not, letting it be easy. And so I would love to ask you where that initial like inspiration came from to stop you know, the roller coaster of I'm just gonna write more, write more, write more when, I don't imagine the inspiration was just flowing.
Yeah,
Right?
I really think it was um necessity. And in my case, it was necessity being the mother of invention in terms of like would I have ever discovered how much ads could change my business, or in marketing in general could change my business, if I hadn't needed to? Like if
Mm.
I hadn't truly needed to, because it's not like I did zero marketing before that. I would participate at the time in like blog tours and things like that. I was like, of course, right? Because you care about your books, you want people to discover them. These are the things you're supposed to do. So I would do them. They didn't, have a massive impact, but I was like, well, I am following, the prescribed things to do. And and so, yeah, I mean, I really think, and so it was then after that of seeing the results and having that be so contrary to what we're told to expect, that I really had to start unpacking everything that I had, had been sort of pre-filled in my mind about what work meant. And and so, because you'll hear people say that, like, oh, work smarter, not harder, or oh, the results are in the 20%, not the 80%, and stuff like that. But here's the thing. I think as long as part of you feels deep down that A, you can work 50 hours a week, and that B, it says something good about you in terms of values, that you're able to and that you do it, then you're going to keep doing it. Right. Like, even if you're not getting the results you want. And so, like, so as the years passed and I was able to solidify, like grow my business, well, because even when I started getting relief, and so there were a few different things that happened. I was lucky enough to eventually find a doctor who was a neurologist, who was, again, did all her tests, was like, haven't found anything. But instead of just saying go away, which, like, it's sort of ironic to me now because that's even so common. She would just say, okay, well, since we didn't find anything, and since you're obviously not okay, and you've seen all these other doctors and they weren't able to help you, how about, if you want, we can just try this medicine, and you'll go home and in a month come back. And then so we did that a few times, go home, come back, go home, come back. And she was just basically willing to keep seeing me and trying things with me until we started identifying a couple of things that were helping. And then I was able to, like, find a specialist in that and go deeper into that. But it really did not reach a point where, actually at any point, where I was like sort of back to normal. For It became, instead of 2 hours, it became a solid 4 hours. And sort of similarly, on a good day, it might stretch to 6, but on a bad day, it might stretch to 2, or it might be a 0. And so I was able to grow my business that way beyond what I thought possible, honestly. And then I felt compelled to sort of share it with other authors, because I saw that they were doing the same thing, of like sort of struggling and feeling like, I think this impulse is when you have someone and they say, well, I'm already working so hard, right? I'm doing this for marketing, and I'm posting on Instagram, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And even when they say, okay, I acknowledge it's not getting me the results I want. So they might ask someone for help, right? So what should I do? What they're asking, I have found, is what should I add?
Yes. And that's exactly right. It's how can I work harder?
Yes.
What else can I take away from my own strength? Can I delete more sleep? Can I delete more from my personal self care? How else can I take from me and my energy and my meanness? What else can I give of me in order to make whatever it is work? And it's like, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I think I did have a little bit of more of like this sort of like highly practical math science um viewpoint of it all. And I was kind of like, well, if you're working 50 hours a week and it's only making this much, then probably we could like remove some things and it won't even change what you're making.
Yeah,
And
not double it. It's not like the answer is going to be magically, okay, now if you work 100 hours a week, you're going to make double it. That's not the answer here, even though most people's minds logically go to that.
right, right. And so yeah, but I also think that I realized that what I had to do was essentially what I now think of as the Marie Kondo method of productivity. So like Marie
Mm,
Kondo is known for like organization,
what
and
makes
so
you happy? What brings you joy?
brings you joy. And
Love
that
it.
this is really important. So like if she's helping someone like clean out their closet, what do you typically do when you clean out your closet? You go in there, you're like, I don't wear this dress, I'll give it away. Oh, this is kind of ratty, I'll throw it away, right? And then you're kind of like, oh, I'm done. This doesn't actually usually have a massive change on the landscape of your closet, right? It's a little bit cleared out, but not a lot. And so what she did, especially for people who had bigger storage issues, would the rule would always be you have to take everything out first, physically remove it. You can't just think about it. You can't just say, I do love that. You have to physically remove it. And I feel like that was a very important part. And once it's all out, like every piece of clothing you own is on the bed, then you pick each item up and you say, does this bring me joy? Am I going to use it? Do I love it? And then if it's the answer is yes, you put it back. And I find that in that situation, you're much more likely to be like, no, I actually didn't love it. I probably would have left it hanging there because it looks kind of nice. And I realized that I paid for it and didn't really use it that much. So I would have left it on the hanger. But now that it's already out, do I really want to put it back? And the answer is no. And so that's when you end up with this like almost empty closet. And you're like, wow, this is all I was wearing, just like 5 things in my whole closet. That's what I.
Yes. Well, and then the idea of envisioning your empty closet, like envisioning the clear space, the empty space, the cleanliness of it, the
Mhm.
freedom of an empty space that you now get to very purposefully fill up as you want.
Yes,
Ooh, that's like it's like starting with an empty calendar and
exactly.
then adding things onto it instead of starting with a packed calendar and going, which ones do I take out?
Right, exactly. It's kind of like, yeah. So when someone is saying, okay, I'm working 40 or 50 hours a week and I'm not getting the results they want, the first thought is, okay, what do I add? Right? Which is what we talked about. And then maybe they might say, okay, if I really don't have the time, what do I take off? The one thing that I take off versus what my health forced me to do, which would have been very hard to do without that, honestly, because I didn't even have the concept that I should, is to completely clear the docket. There is nothing you need to do today except what is going to move the dial you're trying to move right now.
Mm,
And so that happened to be Facebook ads for me. I still love Facebook ads. I'm a huge proponent of them. I still use them now. Um, but it might be something else for someone. It's not like it has to be that. But the point is, if this is the dial you're trying to move, what is the action you're going to take that's going to move it the most? And not anything else. Not like, well, of course, I'm also going to be posting across all the social media platforms. And of course, I'm also, what, the things that had to go for me, even answering my email, like politeness, honestly, politeness. And that was huge for me. Obviously, like many women were raised to be super polite and how that just says things about you as a person. And so of course I'm always going to be the nice person who replies to the emails and who, comments and things like that. And but when you're truly in that space where you have that little time, you're kind of like, wait, if I do that, that's my 2 hours gone. And then I haven't made enough money for my family, and then we don't have a place to live. So that's not going to work. I
yeah.
cannot, I have to sacrifice being polite in order to do what I need to do. And
Yeah.
then once I stopped, I was like, wait, the sky did not fall. Actually, everything was fine. And in fact, we're all busy. And in fact, when I email someone and I don't get a response, I don't freak out. So, like, actually, it's fine. Why was I being this like intense inbox zero person all this time,
Yeah,
And
it's about looking at what really matters,
yeah,
what actually matters in your life. And when you actually prioritize the things that are truly, truly important, then you start opening up your life so that you have the freedom that you've been looking for the entire time.
yeah. And so it's like, even when I get some time back and some energy back over the years, it's like, well, okay, wait, do I now want to start replying to every comment? Or do I want to maybe do a little self-care thing that I didn't have space for that's going to help me maybe get even better? And
Yeah.
also, I mean, the other, realization this has just been, the idea of self-care as being um
So
I
valuable.
right. Well, I think society has a way of looking at it like it's a luxury item, like get a candle, get a massage, like those. I mean, you could argue those are not luxury items. We still view them as luxury items versus it really being like, actually, you're exhausted. You don't even feel like you can move, but get up and cook yourself some fresh green beans because that's going to actually take care of you better than
Yeah.
ordering something, better than just being hungry. And it's like this, really learning about self-care as this mechanism for living versus sort of this like take it or leave it luxury
Yes.
item.
Well, and what's interesting about self-care is it's so important to look at it as a on a case by case basis. Like what self-care is for you as an individual, it might be totally different than the next person. And we have this way of judging someone else's self-care. Like go let them have their massage and their candle and let that be their thing that they need. And if that's not the thing that really fills your soul, then okay. Like let them have their thing that is their thing. Like if the thing that they really, really need in that moment as a stressed out mom who's been screamed at all day is a freaking milkshake, then like go let them have their 5 minutes of sitting in silence with a milkshake. Like I've had my moments where that was the thing that I needed to keep my sanity. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is that like that's kind of what I was saying. Like, I think you could definitely make an argument that massage is not a luxury item, that it is
yeah,
necessary
like
healthcare,
it's
right? Like it's something you may need in order to relax and function.
Yeah, and it's such an individual basis that we just have to like let people do what they need for themselves and we have to let ourselves do what we need for ourselves.
Mhm.
And like you have to prioritize the things you need to keep going or else you're not going to be able to keep going.
Yeah, I think that's it was really a wake up call because prior to that, I always would have said, oh, my willpower can conquer anything. Like I was just a very hard worker and, like I said, very productive. And so I was like, yeah, you feel tired and then you just push past it, right? Like that's what we are all doing, right? And in a way,
And
we're all
it
doing.
works for a while.
It does
You
work.
can do that for like, I don't know, 16 to like 25 maybe and then there comes a stopping point where you're like, "Oh, can't push past that anymore and my body won't wake up without like a solid X amount of sleep anymore."
Yeah. So yeah, really acknowledging, yeah, the body that I'm in and that we're all in and I think having some respect for it, I think in a way elevating willpower so much was really pushing down the idea of my body and what it needs.
Yeah.
So
I'm loving this conversation. I wanted to talk about for a second because I'm loving hearing your journey and I want to hear more about it. But like you talked about how you studied science for so long. And I really feel like that is such a pivotal point in this whole conversation because scientists really study, it's like this art of like what's possible. Let's investigate. Let's explore and experiment with what could work.
yeah,
Let's go look into that. And that whole mindset of like, well, will this work? I don't know. Let's go try it. Really it seems like that permeates your entire, ideology as you've stepped into this entrepreneurial world and you're going, okay, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to see if the ads will work. I'm going to see what's going to work to help me survive, to help me, make this business work. And I love that because you're right. We often think that science and, creativity are so different, but they're really not.
yes, I love that you said that. And it's really insightful. And I completely agree with you about science really being more of an art and a journey than I think some people realize. I think science, like math, can be intimidating for people, especially in particular women who are not like welcomed the same way that boys and men are. And so, so I'll talk to a lot of people who are authors or, even women in other industries like coaching or things like that. And they'll just kind of be like, oh yeah, like, I'm not a math person. I'm not a math person. And while it's like, it's okay if you're not, but sometimes I'll talk to them and they're like, well, yeah, but of course, like I know what my ROI is and I know what this is. And I'm like, wait, you're solidly doing really good math there, like, and so it's like, why do we have this disconnect where we can't just like acknowledge that I'm good at this thing? But I think part of the reason is that we have this idea, well, if I were a math and science person, I would have certainty because that's what we got like from the teachers, right? Because they're teaching something at this basic level, right? That they've taught a bunch of times. Like they are quite certain about what they're teaching. But that's not actually the way that discovery happens, right? Those things that they're teaching were found through this like trial and error, messy situation, right? Trying things that didn't work, you know, 1,000, I'm not gonna remember the quote, but I think it was like Tesla, was it Edison, who said something about, yeah, 1,000 times, you know, failures for every like one sort
Yeah,
of
I
like,
think it was Edison.
yeah. And that's what it's like. And I think even when you get, and again, so I think when you're, if I just read a book on biology, right? It's a very general subject. So everything they say to me, they're going to be pretty sure about. They've figured this out sort of a long time ago.
Well,
But
and
if
then at the same time, there's always new discoveries proving them wrong.
exactly, exactly, proving them wrong, but also if you like traverse that to the like leaves of the tree, essentially where people are researching, like they're specifically facing those areas and figure like saying, okay, we actually don't know why this happens. We've only noticed like a correlation. We don't know why it happens. Like when you like, there's a lot we don't know about our own world, like about, you know, like I was just reading about like how butterfly or caterpillars turn into butterflies, and like the things we know about that process, but also all the things we don't know about that process. And it's kind of like, well, humans have been watching this happen for a very long time, right? And some very smart humans have had them in labs and have had, you know, them under microscopes and know all this stuff. And so it's kind of like, that's science though. That's completely scientific, right? To not know things. And so I think, you know, yeah, there's this idea that if I were to be a more math and science person, I would have to have certainty. And instead, it just being more like, we're all uncertain. We're all uncertain.
Oh,
We're,
yeah. Well, and I think science is to ask why.
yeah.
Science is to ask, why is this happening? And we do that to ourselves all the time, or at least we should be. We're going, why is my business having this problem? Why aren't people reacting the way I expected them to react when I put this product out there? And better yet, asking those why questions about ourselves. Why am I being triggered by this and this and this, by that thing that that person did, or by whatever event that happened in my life? Why am I reacting this way? Like, those are the best kind of scientific questions we can ask. And then we do that deep inner work and then we improve as a human being. Like, that's the best kind of why question we can ask.
I think like another good question to ask is also what if? And I
Mm.
think again, that's something that people don't realize necessarily how common that is in the way that scientific discoveries would happen. So I remember I was reading about like the Hadron particle colliders and how, which if you like look at pictures of them, it's like, oh, this is very extremely scientific. And if you look at some of the discoveries that have come out of it, it seems like very serious. You would almost think, or I would think anyway, very specific. Like these guys know what they're doing. That's what it seems like. But when you actually like look at just like what it is at its core level, they are genuinely just throwing particles together and seeing what happens. That's what a collider is. What if we made them go really fast, a bunch of different kinds, and watch them run into each other and saw what happens? Like it's so I think childish, but like in a beautiful way, right? And so it's like, it feels intimidating. They're very authoritative, the people who do it. They've got like white lab coats on, perhaps, you know, but it's actually this just sort of like what if scenario. And yeah, I mean, I think I do see it too, like in women, we were talking about right at the beginning, this idea of like women having a dream of like, you know, what if I were to write a book? What if I were to own a business? What if I were to do something? And I do think there can be this feeling of like learning to maybe too far of an extreme because of this belief that you can have certainty. If I just have all the pieces lined up perfectly, then I will have a successful author business or a successful other kind of business or whatever, versus it being this journey of experimentation of like, I'm going to try this one piece and it's going to go how I thought, and that's going to be great. I'm going to try this other piece and I'm going to learn something. And then I'm going to, you know, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
built.
Yeah, and there is no certainty. There
Yeah.
never is. No matter how sure anyone is of anything, it can always go awry. There is
Yeah.
no certainty. So we have to question, like, we have to question our definition of success, because that can, ooh, that can look so many different ways. And then you can get to that thing you thought was success and then not feel it and go, what's
Oh, that's the other.
happening? Yeah, that one
So
happens a
much.
lot to
Yes, that one is,
so many people. And
yeah.
so, like, it's so helpful to first be like, I'm going to decide what my success looks like. And I'm going to decide that it is about my abilities and not what anybody else can do about it or does or has any say. It's about my things I actually have power over. That's what my definition of success is. It's
Uh,
things I can control, because then success actually has meaning, because otherwise it's out of my hands and it's not really fair and it's totally chaotic and it's
mhm.
a little, I don't know, chaotic and messed up, right?
Yeah, I think like it's I think that we do place our happiness on resources. And on the one hand, there is part of me that agrees with that because we do live in a capitalistic society where we need resources to live, basically. So it's like we want the freedom to sit in a garden. Well, how are we going to get both that time and the garden? Well, we're probably going to need money to do those things. And so I think there's this natural journey if someone is starting from a place of not having enough resources to acquire those resources. And I do like I said, I think it's completely necessary, right? Because you're not going to find peace in the garden without the money to have the garden, right? Like that's not going to sort of happen. But once you have it and you're sitting there, and then your part of you is going to be happy, but the other part of you is going to be like, oh, there's this whole inner work thing that was like, couldn't maybe even start until I had enough safety to sit here and just breathe deeply in this garden. I had to get here first before I could really even start on that journey.
Yeah, I think the peace is actually in the progress.
Mm.
It's the joys in the journey and the pieces in the progress, because that's where we're meant to be. And once you've reached that thing that you thought you wanted for so long, you're like, oh wait, what's next? There's supposed to be I'm in this life to move forward. And if you reach the thing, then you're like, oh wait, I stopped moving. That doesn't make me happy. I want to keep reaching goals. I want to keep dreaming. I want to keep
And the thing
finding.
is, I think it can be frustrating for people who genuinely don't have enough resources to live because they're like,
Oh yeah.
it's like,
Oh,
how
hands down. And I mean, I've lived in survival mode and lived in poverty for very
survival.
many.
Yeah, it's just like exhausting. You're kind of like,
Yeah.
how join this journey? Because that's not like, because again, you do need a baseline of resources in this society. But on the flip side, I think we're both in Kathy Heller's programs.
Yeah.
She'll kind of say this thing, if someone dumped a bunch of money in your bank account right now, would you just sort of be happy? And so many of us, sort of think, I mean, even now there's a part of me that's been taught to believe that like, yes, that is what would make you happy. And but the reality is of, and I've reached certain levels of success and I've talked to, other women who have, is that it really doesn't. Not just because the thing is not nice, actually, just to be clear, the thing is very nice and it feels very good.
Yeah.
But it's because you're yearning for something more than that. Like I
Hmm.
think, like when I think about like flying first class, like I think that I love to fly first class. And in fact, like now I've reached the point where I won't fly if I'm not going to fly first class. And but I want that for everyone. And I actually believe we can all have it.
Yeah. You
And
know,
and
well,
but it's like that will always be nice, but that's ultimately not why I'm here. That's not my purpose, is to
yeah.
sit first class and enjoy it, right? My purpose is something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and as someone who's lived in struggle for a very long time, you have to be able to find the happiness and joy where you can. And
Mm,
there's always sunshine. Little, even if it's just the tiniest little sparkle of it, it's always there somewhere. Even if that garden is a public park, even
mhm,
if that garden is your neighbors that you're like glancing at across the street, like those
mhm.
flowers are still beautiful, even if you don't know them. Those flowers, that garden still holds beauty, even if you're looking at it from a distance or you're looking at it in a magazine at a grocery store. Like there is beauty everywhere, and you can find reasons to be appreciative in every stage of life.
Yeah.
And, for me, like I had a lot of things going on, and I was finding ways to find my power in making things from nothing, and literally like sewing and making costumes for Halloween for my kids from scratch, and um just literally finding ways to manipulate things around me to find some kind of sense of control over anything that I could find, because when you are living a life that is feels really out of control, you have to find some way to find power in your life. And the thing is, all of us have power.
Yes.
All of us have power. We
Mhm.
really do. And it's the more that you focus on any little tiny bit of beauty and strength and sunshine that you can find, like it grows.
Yeah, what's so funny is I have a wooden sign that I had made up on my wall in my office, and it says, I make things out of nothing,
Oh, I love it.
because that's what I did as a programmer, as a software developer, and that's what I do as an author. But
It's
really,
so
it's like
true.
all doing though, right? Like this podcast is a creation, everything is a creation. And so, yeah,
That's exactly what you did as an author. That's what you did when you were, you're still here, right? That's
yeah,
exactly what you did when, you were really struggling and you only had those 2 hours a day. It was, how do I take those 2 hours a day and find the most beauty I can in them? How do I find the most possible inspiration, the most power that I can with what I have?
yeah. I love
And
the words that you're using because in the moment, it feels very much like survival,
oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It doesn't feel like because you feel very disempowered. But looking back, I see that you're completely right, right? Like I was taking, okay, this is what I can produce, this is what I can make out of nothing. And it's not as much as I could before, and it's not as much as I
Yep.
want to do, but it is what I can do. And so yeah, it is
hmm
power.
Well, and there was still like so much beauty and power in the 18 hours of sleep too. Like that was so needed and so important for your body. Like that rest was so productive for you to even have those 2 hours of productivity. And like it's easy to look at that dynamic and be like, oh, those were the wasted hours. Those were the hours where nothing was getting done. But it's like, nope, those were needed. Those were so important. Those were
It's
the
so funny. I've actually not had anyone say it to me like that. I
that was the time of renewal. And like we look at the cycle of the earth and it's like the winter is just as important as the spring. We have to have, that time of renewal where everything looks like it's been buried and dead for a few months in order for those blossoms to show up in the spring. That time is just as important, even though there's not as much going on the surface. There's so much going on underneath. There's so much healing and restoration going on under the surface that we can't see.
Wow. That's really compelling and interesting because yeah, kind of my narrative around it was more that like I hadn't listened to my body for so long that it finally like sort of took over. Like it was like took the wheel of the car and it's like, we're driving this now. And I had a very combative relationship with my body that I have been working to repair. And yeah, but and I don't think that's necessarily contrary to what you're saying. I think it's similar, but it does come down to the idea that it was necessary, that it
Yeah.
had to be done, and that there was no way to move on without having that rest period and that winter
Yeah.
period. I think what's interesting about the way you're saying it is almost that it's like as opposed to being like this thing I did to myself accidentally, it becomes this like natural cycle thing a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're all on this journey of getting to know our bodies better
Mhm.
and getting more in sync with our bodies. And like there's push and pull in there. And it's especially us women, like it's a journey of getting to know ourselves and our bodies and how we operate and becoming more in alignment with who we are. And there's times in our lives when we're just doing better at that than in others. And it takes the times when we're not doing so hot at that for us to recognize how we can do better. We have to have those periods of contrast so that we can go, oh, that's how I should be doing better. Oh, I see it now. If we don't have the contrast, then we don't have as much clarity so that we can become more aligned.
Absolutely. And I think I always was under the impression that I wasn't as impacted by like body image stuff as other women because I wouldn't maybe like focus as much on dieting or things like that. But I do think it actually impacted me because there was this level of like not necessarily thinking my body deserved certain treatment, hadn't earned it, like wasn't good enough to, and or that it should be, or that it wasn't even maybe here for me. It was for other people to look at, and versus really being like, yeah, like you're talking about, deeply connected and valuing it.
Well, and absolutely, and seeing doctors for women, like they absolutely treat you differently, like
Mhm. Yeah.
from that perspective as well. Like that is something so many of us have experienced that it's a thing. So I would love to talk more about your books and how we can find you and support you in your journey as an author.
So you can find my books at skyewarren.com, Skye. And I do write steamy romance. So if you like that or are interested in that, then you could check it out. And I, yeah, I just love writing romance. I love happy endings. I love even exploring like, sexuality and fantasy elements. And I love sharing my stories.
That's amazing. How have you been able to, we've talked about the balance of like health and doing the thing that lights you up and doing this thing that you love and having a business, but we haven't really talked about like being a mother and having a business and that sort of dynamic and even like being the main breadwinner and as a mom and as the wife, like how has that dynamic looked?
Yeah. So I think I had started saying this. I'm not sure if I finished the thought, but what I love about this career for women in particular. So I write fiction. That's my career. I did write one nonfiction book about my experience as an author for a Kickstarter, and it was called The Bestselling Author Next Door. Because what I find is that, like, there's communities of women who are authors, both in romance and in other genres. And we are often like gifted this ability to, like a lot of the women will either stay home with their kids or they're homeschool their kids, or they have like other family members that they take care of, or like elderly parents, and they're able to do this while still, quote, like working full time as an author and earning a full time income. And so, like the first several years that I was working and earning a full time income, my husband's family, we did tell them. He was like, my husband's always been very proud of me, very vocal about it. He said, she's writing books now. And they actually said to me, "Oh, we're so glad that you're staying home with your son." Like they interpreted that as a hobby. And we did not bother to correct them because there was like no point. We could have, but then that would have been fine. But we didn't. It was just like, we'll just, let that persist. And it wasn't until um, only a couple of years ago that my husband was quitting his job without another job lined up. And that, his uncle had to say, "Well, how are you going to survive?" And he was like, "No, no, she's actually pretty successful as an author. Like that's what we're doing right now." And they were like, "Oh, okay." And so, but I think there's a lot of women out there, and some may mind more, and I understand them minding, and some may not mind, and that are just seen as stay-at-home moms, but are also earning for their families this way. And so I think it's actually really beautiful that it can be this source of, um, like what I did, like as in software development, I never could have done, and like lived through both taking care of my child and like sometimes being there for my husband when he broke his foot, but also when I was going through like my health trouble. Like there was no way that I could be like, I've got 2 hours awake, can I still have a full-time income? Like that was not even an option, right? Like for most women, they can't say, well, I'm going to homeschool my kid, and I also have like, maybe an autistic sibling that I take care of, and but hey, I want a full-time job, right? Like that's not even really on the table for a lot of regular positions. And so this like irregular position gives us a way to live our lives. And so I love the freedom there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not easy to juggle, but in a way, I think it is easier than sort of the traditional jobs that we are offered.
Mm. I love this conversation so much because it so speaks to the idea of this is what's possible
Mm.
for people and for moms. Like, it's actually possible to do the thing that lights you up and have a full-time income from it and like help support your whole family. Like, this is possible. Like, living the dream is possible. It's possible to do it if you are sick. It's possible to do it if you're a mom. Like, it's really possible. And you show that to us in the just such a beautiful way. So thank you so, so much for being here and for showing us this, because more moms need to know that like their dreams are not that far out of reach.
Mhm. Yeah, it's absolutely wild because when you think about like, oh, I'm going to follow my dream or my passion, there can be this feeling of I'd have to give something up, right? Instead of actually, it could be that it could get you the thing like in terms of finances or in terms of security that you wanted, that you felt like you might had to give up. It could be even far surpassed that. So it's like similar to the productivity question. I think it really stretches and inverses all of the assumptions we've been taught.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, do you have any final, words you want to share with us?
Um, well, I think I could say something about like, oh, like, if you have dreams of writing, write or whatever. But I actually think if I had one message to share, it would be the Marie Kondo method of productivity.
I
So
love it.
whatever your goals are and whatever your time frame, what would happen if you completely clear the slate and only put in things that are moving the dial? Because the other thing about experimentation is it does require space, right? Because if I need results in 5 minutes, there's no room to experiment. I've got to do the known thing, right? So to actually experiment, you need a little bit of space. And that space is, traditionally hard to come by if you do it the old way of taking things out. But I think if you try the Marie Kondo method, you can really expand how much space and breathing room you have in your business and your life.
It's so, so valuable. And so here's everyone's permission to give yourself space, like so much space, like clear it all. You don't have to be polite anymore. You don't have to answer all the messages. You can just clear your whole schedule and give yourself space. You have permission. Thank you so, so much for being here. This was an amazing conversation.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, Skye. This was such a good episode. Like, I have loved re-listening to it because it was so, so good. So here are my favorite takeaways. Number one, self-care is a mechanism for living, not a take it or leave it luxury item. What? I'm like pumping my hands up in the air, even though you can't see me at all. Number two, science is really an art. It's like, what's possible? Let's investigate. Let's explore and experiment with what could work. Let's look into that. We often think that science and creativity are so different, but they're really not. Number three, we think that if I were a math and science person, I would have certainty, but that's not actually the way the discovery happens. Those things were found through trial and error and messy situations. That is science, to not know things. Number four, I'm going to decide what my success looks like. I'm going to decide that it is about my abilities and not about what anyone else can do about it. It's about things I actually have power over, because then success actually has meaning. Number five, the peace is in the progress and the joy is in the journey. That's where we're meant to be. We're in this life to move forward. Number six, you have to be able to find the happiness and joy where you can. There's always sunshine. Even if it's just the littlest, tiniest sparkle of it, it's always there somewhere. Flowers are still beautiful even if you don't own them. There is beauty everywhere, and you can find reasons to be appreciative in every stage of life. The thing is, all of us have power. And the more that you focus on any little tiny bit of beauty and strength and sunshine that you can find, it grows. And number seven, to actually experiment, you need a little bit of space. Here's permission to give yourself space. Oh my goodness, I adore this episode. Those were such good takeaways. Love it so much. If you like those takeaways and you want them on pretty quotes in your inbox, sign up for the Snippet of Sunshine. The link is in the show notes. You can also go find Skye's books. Her website the link is in the show notes. Go check out her books if you're interested in steamy romance. And also if you just want some inspiration of like what's possible for you and your life. You can also go check out my website, which is KaraleighGarrison.com. And that was recently updated because I finally was able to get back into the back end of my website after so long of being locked out of it. And then last but not least, if you want to go check out my other podcast, which is Podcast Like a Mother, and learn more about podcasting, that is also in the show notes. So I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you did and you found it inspiring, especially, you know, as a mom who's like, oh my gosh, this is available to me too, please go share it with somebody who needs to hear that this is an option. That being an author and living your dream is something that you can do too. Please go share it with someone who needs to hear that, because I feel like we really all do. But I bet you can think of someone really specific who needs this message. And I think it'll just make their day that you thought of them. And last but not least, I'm going to leave you with a song. I hope you have an awesome day. For so long, I could only see what was right in front of me. And just like that, I heard what you had to say, and it took my breath away. Maybe I can open myself to wonder what's possible. There's magic in the air. What's possible? Should I let my imagination go there? What's possible? Only in my wildest dreams. What's possible? Just